Growing outrage over the Hollywood celebrities that refuse to speak out about fashion powerhouse Balenciaga's controversial ads. Featuring children holding teddy bears clad in bondage outfits, celebrities with ties to the brand have been silent, including Nicole Kidman, Dua Lipa, and Salma Hayek, who is married to the billionaire CEO of the fashion brand's parent company.
Come on, if you know the words, let's go.
What do I think of her?
Yes.
I don't think of her.
Glass of red wine and a swisher. I think you get the picture. Bitch.
Here I go.
Read about that in the New York fucking Post.
Hello. So we're recording from an undisclosed location in a secret bunker.
Yeah.
In a warehouse, in a black facility that has been erased from Google Images.
If you track the
because-
IP and look it up on Google Maps, it'll be purposely blurred out and pixelated within miles. We've made sure of that.
Oh, no, actually, to be actually more clear, we're recording from the stockroom of a Balenciaga store in an unmarked location.
Or it's that Balenciaga store
Actually,
in Waco, the one that's like an art exhibit where it's just like that one lone shop in the middle of the desert. Like we're like a mile into that. A la Resident Evil Hive, like...
We're recording in the new Balenciaga store they're building in New York, which is somehow still proceeding in the midst of all of this. The construction workers have actually paused drilling through the concrete in the safe room that we're currently in. So I think we should be good. Welcome, everyone. My name's Joan Summers, local gossip.
And this is the local artist and Matthew Lawson.
And this is Eating for Free, the podcast recording from a Balenciaga store and also the edge of the internet. We have quite a few of you listening to this, so welcome to all of you who are joining us for the first time since our first part of the Balenciaga episode series that we're running currently. Lots of you are new listeners, so welcome to hell. We're happy to have you here.
They have no idea what they're in
get
for.
Hot.
Yeah.
To the rest of you, we're so sorry for poisoning your mind with even worse information today. Like last week, we will be discussing topics like child sexual assault and, other... I wouldn't say we will be discussing it, but we will be referencing it in relationship to the Balenciaga stories. So... I just want to make that clear in case that is a sensitive topic and you're checking in again for the second week after not listening to the first episode. This probably is not the episode for you.
Yes.
However, I do want to note, and a listener really actually correctly pointed this out for us on Twitter, and I think it's a really good point. We were quoting people like Fox News and the Kanye Wests and the Daily Mails in our last episode when we used the word that CP is an acronym for. However, this episode, we will not be using those words together because they are not actually descriptive of what porn really is in relationship to what Fox News is talking about.
Yes.
Specifically, like consenting porn, and we don't want to draw any unnecessary relationships between the two. So, like I said previously, we will be using child sexual assault in lieu of those words together because I just feel like it is more descriptive. And I think it's just an important distinction to make. So if you are the person who pointed that out to us on Twitter, thank you so much. That was, I think, a really good point.
I mean, that's kind of what this whole conversation has been about too, is a lot of people having to reassess the ways that we talk about, child sex crimes or inappropriate behavior towards children in media, and realizing not only we're not really equipped to talk about this, I think, as we established in our episode last week, but just how actually loaded those terms are and how often people can use it to co-opt very different ideas than we're trying to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. And the good news is that what we're going to be discussing more this week is we don't really want to get back into the nitty gritty of it all, right? We've very clearly laid out the stakes of this story, and about a week has gone by since we recorded last, and some things have come up that I think are important to take note of. But what we really want to do in this particular episode is really dissect the artistic intent of the photographer, as well as his work within the culture as it exists more broadly, and some of his works that have gained relatively similar cultural notoriety for different reasons, and how through his work he has almost predicted the very news cycle that has led to Balenciaga's cultural downfall over the last 3 weeks. And in the course of that, I think we will make a little bit more sense of the forces at play. So we do need to lay out some of the ripple effects that have gone on over the last couple days, because there has been quite a few updates, but I don't really want to get lost in those details because ultimately I don't think that they're that important. Don't you agree?
Yeah, no, I honestly agree as well. I think the way we've been framing it before, we can continue and not engage in this kind of ridiculous stuff that's bubbling up at every corner.
Yeah. And it's interesting too. Part of the, I guess, pitfalls of doing series like this, where we break up our analysis over multiple parts, is, so many listeners were jumping to conclusions that I hope we are going to reach for you all in this episode,
Definitely.
And one of the things I want to start with, because it's going to kind of ground what's been going on in the last few days, is, I've seen a lot of people talk about this, and there's been a few different cultural instances, I think, where this particular sentiment has bubbled up. And last week we talked more broadly about the backlash and inciting cultural violence and the cultural forces at work around trans children specifically. And you can actually listen to my episode about gender reveal for like a more broad discussion about what those points of violence and warfare are currently in like culture as we know it, specifically like Fox News, New York Times, that kind of thing. I get into it on gender reveal, and we got into it a little bit in our last episode, how, we believe, and I think are still of the belief, that the same groups and the same white nationalists and the same TERF groups that are actively waging war against drag shows and trans children, and the white nationalists that are acting as, militants and militant trainers for people who enact mass shootings, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Like, those are overlapping now with a lot of the forces leading the charge with the Balenciaga thing. And I think a lot of viewers and listeners of the news and of our podcast have pointed out like the hypocrisy of people in the media who hang out with people who have been convicted of sex crimes or have been under allegations of sex crimes specifically involving children. Like, the fact that they are going to war against Balenciaga is like some form of hypocrisy. Like, I think we do that news story quite a bit. And I want to just start by saying, in reaction to that, the hypocrisy is the point, don't you think? Like, the fact that
absolutely.
It is hypocritical at all is the entire point. Like, they don't actually believe this. This is a tool. This is not an actual legitimate moral crusade. I do believe that there are actual people in crisis over this, right? Like, we know a lot about how, there are actual parents out there who have been whipped up into a frenzy that their children are being transgenderified. But like, for the most part, like, a lot of the media forces, right, are acting as, matches to the flame, gasoline on the open bonfire, right? Like, they're
America
being
does
hypocritical, but yeah, right? Like, that's part of the point. So I don't want to get lost in that too much. Again, like I said earlier, like, they are hypocritical. That is the world that we live in. Hypocrites have microphones and they are out there waging war against trans people. Like, welcome to actually being in the present with us. Now that you're up to speed, we can continue. So.
Yeah, it really is like, welcome to what's been happening for a very long time, because literally nothing with this is new whatsoever. No nuance, honestly, at all.
And it's always like, and I find that it's well-meaning people who would describe themselves as allies or leftist trans allies, and also actual trans people being like, wow, it's so hypocritical that like Matt Gaetz would like have something to say about Balenciaga when, what he's under investigation for. And it's like, yeah, that's literally the point. Like, that's literally the point. Okay, so
the call is always coming from inside the house. Let's just say.
Oh, it's not just that the call is coming from inside the house. the house where the call is coming from is also the telecommunications headquarters. Like, and there's some sort of like government op being ran out of the telecommunications headquarters as well.
Yes.
And it's the local community center too. Like, it's like a giant
it
mall
was
complex.
always a cake, like, meme, basically.
Yeah. In the beginning, there was the telephone making the call, and then we built everything else around it. So, like, so this is from Kron in Texas. This was a story from yesterday. Quote, hashtag or quote unquote pedophiles banner hung in front of Texas Balenciaga store after controversial ad campaign. So we're not going to get into the specifics because there isn't very much here, but I'm getting this from Kron and the link is in our notes. You can actually see the photo of the front of this Balenciaga store in Dallas. So Dallas, Texas TV posted an image on Twitter Sunday showing a white banner with pedophiles written in red, all capital letters, strung across the entrance and blocking the doors to a Balenciaga store in Dallas's North Park Mall. It's unclear precisely who is responsible for putting up the banner, and multiple attempts to reach management at the location were unsuccessful as of Monday morning. So now we are seeing like actual real world physical repercussions.
Literally locals who are mobilizing. Like, I'm assuming probably
Yes.
through some Facebook groups and some WhatsApp chats, but there's some organized material happening here.
We are not working with actual like journalistic evidence when I say this. This is me positing something to you all. So if this is quoted later, please do not state this as a fact, merely as me making an editorialized hypothesis. But I am almost all but convinced that if you were to find the people organizing against like drag queen story time in Dallas and the people who organized putting up this banner, I am almost positive that Venn diagram is a circle.
Oh, absolutely.
I have no evidence for it, but I am almost positive. So
Absolutely.
there's also another update in that we talked about the lawsuit against the production company for the ad campaign involving the legal paperwork that was shot months before the photo shoot with the teddy bears, from a separate photographer, separate like campaign directive. Balenciaga has actually dropped the $25 million suit against the producers of that ad campaign. I got this from Page 6 this morning. On Friday, right after we recorded, they said that they would be dropping the lawsuit against the producers and that they wouldn't be moving forward with it. That is in response to people basically being like, you should take responsibility. The Satanists at Balenciaga are to blame, not the retouchers, right? Like,
Yeah,
again,
sure.
It's more nonsense, but I do think that it is important that we are now living in a place where Balenciaga has completely taken everything that is happening to it at face value and has like sunk to the level of the QAnon conspiracy theories about it, right? They're like,
No, they're fully
now
agreeing
by,
with them. Yeah.
yeah, by like stooping to the level where they have like retracted the campaign and issued apologies and what we're going to get into next actually like validated that actual harm was done to children during the shooting and dissemination of these campaigns. Like, they have validated the backlash. So Balenciaga, I got this from CNN, but it's from Instagram originally. Demna has apologized for the ad campaign. And Matt, do you want to read that for us while
Yes.
I pull up the photo of this?
We're getting this from, CNN, Instagram as well. Quote, I want to personally apologize for the wrong artistic choice of concept for the gifting campaign with the kids, and I take my responsibility. It was inappropriate to have kids promote objects that had nothing to do with them. As much as I would sometimes like to provoke a thought through my work, I would never have an intention to do that with such an awful subject as child abuse that I condemn. Period. I need to learn from this, listen and engage with child protection organizations to know how I can contribute and help on this terrible subject. I apologize to anyone offended by the visuals, and Balenciaga has guaranteed that adequate measures will be taken not only to avoid similar mistakes in the future, but also to take accountability in protecting child welfare in every way we can.
Okay, so this is something also that I think is like so key here. Let's go back to the very first sentence. So he says, the wrong artistic choice of concept for the gifting campaign with the kids. So he's not talking about the campaign with the legal letters on the
'cause,
desk.
again, two different
He's
photo
talking
shoots.
about the one with the children. And he says, quote, "As much as I would like to provoke a thought through my work, I would never have intention to do that with such an awful subject as child abuse." So what he is now saying is that the subject of that campaign was child abuse. Like, do you see what I mean
Yeah,
by
that's the part where I'm
Balenciaga validating
like, hold
what is
up.
now happening to them? Like,
Yeah,
this
like
is
it
what
was
I'm
maybe
talking
unintentional,
about.
but it did contribute to some larger like battle against child abuse.
And like, well, no. What he's saying here and how it has been construed is that the subject of the campaign itself was like
it was
child
depicting
abuse
that.
artistically. Yes. That's what I'm saying now, where
makes me
like
so
we have reached
confused.
a point. No, we have reached a point artistically in the culture where a large group of QAnon Pizzagate crazed Republicans and conservative media pundits have successfully whipped up a moral panic about widespread child abuse in the entertainment industry, pointed, by the way, in the wrong direction, because we know there is widespread child abuse in the entertainment industry, but a lot of it has happened very blatantly in front of us and is also happening when these conservative Republican moms pick up their phones to record their kids having a meltdown for their mommy blog TikToks. Like, we see this
that's the
happening,
thing.
but this is now not something that we actually experience in our everyday lives. What Balenciaga has done by responding to this and what these conservatives have successfully done is turn child abuse into like an arcane secretive ritual rather
Yes.
than something that we can materially see around us every single day, oftentimes from the very people whipping this moral panic into a frenzy.
No, it
Do you
really
know what I
is.
mean?
Yeah, no, it reminds me so much of like those kind of like, you know, cult communist scares in the 70s, where just the idea of having like devil imagery meant you were contributing to like, you know, devil and evil things, and that was against God. Like, it kind of gives that, where it's like maybe nothing literally happened at all, but the fact that there was the idea or intent or concept present at all means you should be condemned, means you are contributing, means you are part of this. And I think what bothers me the most is it's like, it's nothing about literally what happened to the children on this photo shoot, nothing about how were the children treated, nothing about where their steps
Or the
being
fact
taken
that they're
or laws
posting
broken.
these children's photos over and over and over
The fact
again.
that children can be in
they are
ads
the reasons
globally.
everyone saw it.
Yeah, like, that's the thing too. Like, it's never about anything literally material at all. Like, nothing about this is material. It's a completely relatively subjective concept in terms of what's being depicted.
You know, I'm thinking about this now, and it just like makes me. I hate to say something so frivolous as like makes me crazy, but like what I feel myself getting caught up in, and this is the part of like the hypocrisy is the point, right? Because it's not really about the child abuse. It is about, for the very like powerful people involved now in this, it's not about child abuse. It's about controlling art and the media, right?
Yes.
It's about being able to control artistic production. And it is no coincidence that currently the Supreme Court is hearing a case about whether or not a wedding planner should have to be involved or legally is required to do business with gay people. Like, we are relitigating the gay wedding cake discourse that was already decided on literally in the Supreme Court as we speak. And it is no coincidence that that is going on while they are also asking whether or not queerness itself or any form of non-patriarchal, heteronormative, white supremacist imagery should be allowed to be reproduced in the media at all. Right?
No,
Like,
my God,
that's
you're
actually
so right.
what it's
no,
about.
the entire like no kink at Pride discourse is like literally this. Like, it's literally this. Like, they want to say it's because children are involved. It completely changes everything, as if this was adults, there wouldn't be any hubbub or concern whatsoever. But you have people in the Daily Mail and New York Post circling what is apparently demonic imagery or red material, which is demonic, or this BDSM like outfit or this. What was the one? They had a hoodie, like a black hoodie, and they circled it saying
Yes.
a cult, like, you know, and it's, I'm like, this is quite literally the same thing that Christians have been doing to books and media and music for the last like 50 years. It's the exact same thing. I cannot believe we're still doing it.
I want to be very clear here. I want to not be misquoted or misquote what's happening. Specifically, what I'm discussing is a NBC News article that dropped this morning, which says, quote, Supreme Court leans towards web designer over refusal to work on same-sex wedding websites. I will include the link in that below, but the web designer Lori Smith is being represented in the Supreme Court currently in a battle to not design or work on wedding websites for gay couples in Colorado. And at stake is whether or not Colorado's anti-discrimination laws prevent Lori from refusing to work with gay people. And this, again, we have already litigated in the Supreme Court, but the conservative justices who now control the court are maybe going to overturn that ruling through this case.
I love
and
it.
so what I am,
democracy in action.
you know, what I'm saying here is like, it's no shock that this is happening while the Balenciaga thing is happening. Or what I was also thinking about, and apologies for everyone while I go on yet another classic Joan fifth dimensional chess brain tangent, you know, I'm thinking about how, you know, conservatives are so obsessed with children's media, right? They're so obsessed with what goes on in children's media. But they are not obsessed with what happens to child actors on set, being pulled out of school, being forced to work obscene hours, being isolated from any sense of, you know, other children or community, having schooling laws that are not strictly regulated, meaning many of them either are at failing grades or worse because they are not receiving a regular education, and the people given to them to actually provide that education are either the same parents collecting a check from them or people with very little oversight legally and very little transparency to the rest of us about what those kids are learning, right? Studios who will send minors on press tours with adults and work obscene hours answering questions in quote unquote adult spaces for adults, being filmed by adults as like 6, 7, 8-year-olds sitting in front of crowds of hundreds answering questions about the new Marvel movie or the new Disney movie. Like, those are not the things that they're concerned about. They're concerned about the content, right? And like Jenna Ortega was just talking about making the new Wednesday Addams TV show.
I was hearing about
Jenna
that.
is an adult. Jenna's an adult, right? But like we even see this with like actual actors where Jenna talks about having COVID and having to choreograph a dance sequence while having COVID and filming it while having COVID. And it's like framed in all the entertainment news as this like big aspirational thing that had happened, right?
Yeah, like it's so impressive.
Can you believe? Can you believe Jenna had COVID and choreographed a dance?
This move. She still showed up to work.
Yeah, this actress who is not a trained dancer and was not sent to school for dance training was like basically asked to do multiple jobs on set and work while sick. How cool. And everyone's like, wow, how cool. And like no one's thinking that's actually like workplace abuse. I was about to say,
like it's giving OSHA violation. It's giving abusive, toxic work environment.
Right? But it's funny because what I'm saying, not it's funny that it happened, but like that happened to an adult and no one cares, right? Just imagine what children are being asked to do on set. We know what children are being asked to do because Britney Spears famously had to do it and is now suffering the consequences as an adult. And yet no one cares, right? But God forbid we make this campaign and disseminate it. That is the reason why there is some widespread conspiracy against children
people
in the media, right?
quite literally are saying, as we've been seeing in our research on Instagrams, commenting on anyone involved and just saying, you're a pedophile. You're a pedophile. You condone pedophilia. You condone human trafficking. You condone satanic, demonic behavior. And it's so funny how like those same people are the ones who call out the lefts for like their culture war, for like doing their witch hunts. And I'm like, you're quite literally stalking people's Instagram pages, going a year back on their posts and commenting pedophile 6 times in a row. For what?
Again, though,
to do what?
We know this also because, like, one thing that you can like very closely tie to like moral panics is like moments of extreme economic precarity. Like the satanic panic in the 80s was coinciding with an actual recession and Reagan economics in a time when people's livelihoods were at risk and the future had never been more uncertain for like many Americans at the time, right? We also saw the extremely nationalistic response to the war in Iraq in the 2000s during a literal recession and how that affected people's perceptions of the American government overseas, and also the kinds of products they were willing to engage with, the kinds of movies they went and saw. And we saw a lot of companies actually swoop in to capitalize on that fervor to enrich themselves in a moment of very extreme economic precarity. And what are we facing currently? Another recession.
Are you telling me
are
the
companies
economy is tied to pop culture and social response? You telling me there's a grand connection?
In a moment when companies are trying to siphon off the very last amount of resources that the working and middle classes have, what better way to get people to come and buy your product instead of the competitors, especially the competitors overseas, than to whip them up into a moral panic that incites them to purchase a specific way, right? What happens when you have a media landscape that is dominated by Christian nationalists and it controlled by Christian nationalists and what gets produced? Who is gonna pay to see the movies? The Christian nationalists. And whose movies are they gonna see? The ones that comply with their artistic standards, right? Like, do you see how this all gets built? Do you see how literally the pipeline of the moral panic is already buzzing underneath us? I don't know why a pipeline would be buzzing. Chugging, whirring, pumping. Like, there's a lot of words I could have used.
Leaking.
But the one I went with, yeah. Well, it's leaking. It's specifically leaking under RuPaul's Ranch because they fracked the mountain too hard and the pipeline got exposed.
There's too much crude oil coming out.
That's actually why Jeffree Star looks the way that he does, because the pipeline's leaking.
It's in the water. Can I read Balenciaga's latest apology that they've done since we recorded last? Because I think it's very similar to what Demna posted.
Must we? Yeah, we must.
I'll be quick. But again, it's that I want to talk about it because it very much is that thing we just talked about. But again, the acknowledging, the like validating of it being abusive child material. I'll be quick. So this is from Balenciaga. They posted this, I believe, on Friday. Yes. So after we recorded our last episode, they said Balenciaga takes the following action with the objective to learn from our mistakes as an organization. And then they break it down to basically what they're doing at different levels. So new control instances. Our current process for content validation has failed, and we recognize the need to do better. On the internal side, we nominate with immediate effect an image board responsible for evaluating the nature of our content from a concept to final assets, including legal, sustainability, and diversity expertise. On the external side, we have appointed a best-in-class agency to assess and evaluate our content. Organization, we have reorganized our image department to ensure full alignment with our corporate guidelines. On the lawsuit, Balenciaga has decided not to pursue litigation, as we just discussed. Learn and contribute. We want to learn, help, and contribute to protect children. We are starting trainings on responsible communication across our teams. Together with my team, we will go on quote unquote listening tour to engage with advocacy groups who aim to protect children. Donation. We have set aside a significant fund for grants to organizations so that we can help make a difference in protecting children. And then again, this is from Cedric, the president and CEO of Balenciaga. I want to personally reiterate my sincere apologies for the offense it caused and take my responsibility. At Balenciaga, we stand together for children's safety and do not tolerate any kind of violence and hatred message. I also want to bring that up because, like we talked about the capitalism of it all, I feel like it's so interesting to see like live and in action basically an entire not new industry, but like an evolving, growing industry of basically PR agencies, diversity, inclusion effort groups that like are now about to get paid probably millions of dollars by Balenciaga to not only like mitigate this drama, but to like, you know, quote unquote, like shape the future of the brand to make sure this doesn't happen again. And I just think it's very interesting how many people are basically ready to profit immediately off something like this and take basically an ownership in the future of this alleged sensitive material.
Yeah, it's fucking infuriating, and I'm about to make you even more infuriated.
I was about to say.
Because that goes hand in hand with what I'm about to read from Forbes. So Forbes put out this. Okay, this is just the kind of journalism that we hate, where we get this all the time, where like after, and I hate to be crass about a genuinely horrifying subject, but after every mass shooting, we are flooded with emails in our press inbox about expert available to discuss mass shooting, right?
Yep.
Like immediately.
The whole industry of pundits ready to go.
Yes. And after this Balenciaga thing, it's like expert on sexual assault weighs in on Balenciaga, open for interview. And we're like flooded with emails to that lake. And what these kinds of articles that I'm about to read from Forbes do is literally just say yes to those people, and without questioning them at all, asking about their credentials, actually doing literally any journalism required to actually like coherently interview a subject. They just say yes to these like consultant brand marketers and then let them say wild shit in their inbox or over the phone and then just publish whatever they say.
No, it's really giving like SEO chosen like agencies. Like
Yes.
they just Google like diversity, inclusion, child, something. And then the first that pops up.
It's like those stories we talked about. I think we talked about this specifically with like the New York Times. There was an example of like car crash fatalities and how they like quoting an expert with no actual data, but then their reporting of the reporting becomes the actual reporting. Or like those like trans articles the New York Times is always posting, how you actually Google the experts and it's like a company that got made 2 months ago with like no actual published scientific material. And they're just like, we incorporated a month ago and we called ourselves advocates for children and we just sent out a mass mailer saying interview us, and no one asked us about our credentials whatsoever.
Oh no,
So
my favorite's when
now
they're
we're
like
published in the New York Times.
Doctor of like sexual identity or something, like doctor of LGBT studies, and it's like, oh, they're a doctorate, like PhD. Look it up. That's just a title. They just put that on
From
on
Phoenix
their
University.
homepage. Yeah, like their general education is literally the same as us. Like, just...
Yeah. So this is from Forbes, quote, "Where's caring as apologies from Balenciaga and Demna fall flat?" Just imagine the huge jerk off motion I'm making. Okay, Caring is the company that owns Balenciaga. Quote, this is directly from the article. I'm going to read 2 paragraphs that happen next to each other, and then we're going to ignore the rest of the article because it is truly the most jack-off material I've ever read in Forbes. Quote, "Having worked inside the luxury industry for years as a strategic advisor most recently, though with no personal experience with Balenciaga herself, Susanna Nicoletti believes the problems stem from the high regard placed on creatives within the luxury corporate culture who largely operate without effective management oversight." Nicoletti is also the author of the book Luxury Unlocked. Quote,
Plug.
"Balenciaga has been disturbing even before the teddy bear ad. It's been full of negativity and darkness, almost post-apocalyptic. Fashion should entertain. It can be an incredible strategic tool to leverage to make a world a better place, but it should be uplifting, beautiful, a work of art." So like, okay.
I think all of fashion should be this. That's quite a fucking statement.
Let's
I think art
unpack
should be
this
pretty.
briefly.
I want only the brightest colors.
Balenciaga has been disturbing even before the teddy bear ad. It's been full of negativity and darkness, even apocalyptic. Fashion should entertain. It should be beautiful, uplifting, a work of art.
It makes me want to die.
So
it's like, this is what we're
this
up against.
person
These are the people we're up against.
This person got a platform in fucking Forbes to just have a microphone and say, fashion should be for doo-doo babies and titty babies who can't stop sucking off Disney's massive leaking cock. Like, I should not feel threatened whatsoever by art or the production of art or ideas themselves. Because the minute I am confronted with anything that somewhat breaks the beautiful mold of fashion, I am immediately being victimized, attacked, threatened. My rights are being infringed.
It's really
on,
so upsetting.
and it is defying the very work of fashion itself.
It's
right?
like really
how
upsetting.
How dare Balenciaga be post-apocalyptic or dark, right? Like,
to live in a world where
that's
like
what I'm
that
saying.
is so upsetting, and that is like you don't see it as anything other than like, I don't know, I guess disturbing and like upsetting.
Yeah. But this is what I'm saying, where like the consultants are just a symptom of the broader cultural
absolutely.
forces, right?
Absolutely,
like
yes.
This person is parroting what people behind closed doors are saying, which is that we need art and we need culture to only look like this. And to do that, we have to tamp down on the art that makes people think about the world as a place that isn't happy, sunshine, rainbows, beautiful, beautiful. Because the second people start to question the world around them, or the second people start to think, they start to gain a form of consciousness that directly inhibits our ability to fucking burn the planet to the ground and become billionaires in the process before we escape to fucking Mars. Like, that's what's really going on. They don't want the dark apocalyptic scary art, because Demna makes art about the world ending. Demna makes art about climate change and about people not being able to afford to live, and about the back rooms of the UN where all of the decisions for us are made by people who are wealthier than everyone we've ever met ever in our entire lives. Like, that's what they don't want.
You know what's giving post-apocalypse vibes are people literally putting pedophiles banners on top of Balenciaga stores. I can't imagine more people wasting their time. Balenciaga's luxury brand existing, and then people having the energy to do something at a mall that's already been abandoned and no one is going to see except for these tweets.
Like
it's so embarrassing
like
and sad.
These people
Waste
want
of fucking
Coco
time.
Melon, as friend of the podcast Enrique has said. These people want Coco Melon World. Like, they want.
No, yes, that's exactly
They are
what
a
it
bunch
is.
of adult iPad children who want the entire world to look, feel, sound like, and operate like a Coco Melon skit. Like, right? Like, we're all the smooth babies getting handed the colorful shapes on our plate, and nothing is threatening and nothing ever goes wrong. And the second we are confronted with adversity, is it immediately solved by more colorful shapes being dumped on our plate. Like,
it really does make me want to like get a lobotomy, like stat, like group lobotomy on us, Joan. Honestly,
so this is another thing
this.
from the Daily Mail. This is another thing from the
Oh,
Daily Mail, and I
here we
promise
go.
you guys, we are going to get to the photographer, but these are so important to set up. So we're going to just quickly go through this, because this Daily Mail article came out in the early days of the controversy, and I wanted to set it up with the Forbes articles. So let's get into Daily Mail. So this is, you know how Daily Mail has like subheaders because it's good for SEO, where it's like shocking adverts and then the article. So the actual title of the article is, quote, Balenciaga faces backlash over its bondage themed campaign featuring children. Female is FEMAIL, like the female section of the Daily Mail. It's called female.
Oh yeah,
It's giving you've got she-mail, you
Yeah,
know,
I was
from
about to say.
RuPaul's Drag Race early days. Don't worry, new listeners. I am a transgender. I am a transsexual. I can make that joke. Just imagine us having to actually let listeners know that I am a transsexual. Can you imagine?
You
Like,
literally
they got
might be
this
saving
podcast
yourself
and they
like
got
a
this far.
barrage of Twitter comments and mentions and comments. Like, honestly.
They got this far. They came here either from like gender reveal or the last episode, and they're like, "Wait a minute, I'm listening to a podcast with a transgender." Okay. Female reveals its controversial history, from fetish masks to bizarre horror-themed ads. So this
like
is
that
where
is
we're
inherently bad already. Like that's inherently a bad thing.
This is where we're talking really, and what I'm getting at about art being controlled and the production of images being controlled by white Christian nationalists.
Yep.
So In January, this is directly from the Daily Mail, quote, the fashion house revealed a number of images as part of its campaign celebrating the Year of the Tiger. The 57-piece collection is modeled by children and adults in a homely setting, interacting with each other as though they are family. However, can you click on this link so you can actually see these images? Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. Mm-hmm. However, the models are in position in unusual poses for the images. In one, a child can be seen sitting on the lap of a male model, while in another, a child lays down with their head on a male model's shoulder. Okay.
I'm looking at them now, and Mama, what are they talking about?
Matt, they're saying
this
that
child was seen near an adult.
This child was seen not just near an adult man. Near an adult man. And I'm not like...
They're another model. They're literally a coworker. Like, I don't... Is this not an office? Like, is this not... What are you talking about? Like,
okay. Like, I hate to, like, jump to conclusions. I am not gendering children. But the problem is that the child is being gendered as a boy and the model, the adult, is being gendered as a man. Like, that is the issue here. That it is an adult man with a young boy child. Like, or in one, a girl child. But specifically here, the reason they're calling out the fact that the male model is a man is, I think, key to the whole homosexual panic that is like ripping through society. So it continues, quote, and it's not just Balenciaga, which has faced controversy over its adverts. The label is owned by Kering, which owns a number of other, quote unquote, controversial labels, including Gucci. In another of the company's campaigns from this year, a number of child models can be seen posing in recreations of classic horror scenes. From The Shining's terrifying twin girls to Clockwork Orange and even the masked party from Eyes Wide Shut, Gucci spared no expense in bringing the scenes to life as only Gucci can. Meanwhile, the BDSM teddy bear bag isn't the first controversial product from the brand, which shoppers have deemed offensive. They also had the ones that we mentioned last week, including the sweatpants that had boxers that were exposed stitched into them. And this is, I think, something that's like really key here is they're like saying, okay, so children were photographed near male models, which is scary. And then Kering owns Gucci. And Gucci put children in recreations of horror movies, including The Shining, which is scary. But also, Balenciaga did something racist. And them doing something racist is the exact same as the children being posed with the male models.
Also, it's like they're okay. Sorry, not to like poke a hole in the like literally cheese grater that this is, but like the fact that they're showing a picture of like from The Shining, where you know the kid is sitting on that like really trippy kind of orange floor. Why is the recreation of a shot that already involved a child actor like inappropriate? Like, isn't it true to like are horror movies not supposed to have children? Is it horror movies okay with children unless we make it an ad for a clothing line?
Because we're trying to whip up a satanic panic, right? Like, not only are we relitigating these photos from the Gucci campaign, we're relitigating The Shining again.
Yeah, which they never had a problem with before. We're
relitigating a cult. But like, again, and then they're like, oh, and all you cancel culture warriors, remember when they did something racist? This is exactly the same. Like, that's the most infuriating part. What it is, that they're taking like actually valid criticisms about Balenciaga's willy-nilly use of racial motifs and comparing it to their satanic panic. Like, it's infuriating. There's also this advertisement. I'm calling it an advertisement because it is just a legislative advertisement in Fox News disguised as an opinion piece. I apologize for what everyone is about to hear. It doesn't include anything other than just things that will completely offend all of your senses, including your brain. It might actually start your brain like leaking out of your ears. And I just want you to know that Eating for Free, aka Girls and Gays Incorporated, is in no way legally liable for what is about to happen to your spiritual, mental, or physical state after I read these 3 paragraphs. So let me begin. I'm not even going to credit the author because, like, fuck her. Okay, quote, The high fashion brand Balenciaga recently released a shocking ad campaign sexualizing young children. These ads featured children holding stuffed animals dressed in BDSM gear like harnesses and nets. There was even a court document about child pornography partially hidden in one image. Once again, separate
Partially
campaigns,
hidden.
but Fox News doesn't care about journalism or facts, so that doesn't get distinguished whatsoever. Quote, "The truth is, children can't advocate for themselves. They can't organize, vote, or lobby. They are totally defenseless. It is the civic obligation and moral imperative of reasoned adults to be their voice and refuse to give an inch of ground to those who want to destroy them."
Destroy,
Who wants to destroy
the children?
Matt,
Eliminate,
who
like,
wants to
zap out of...
Matt, who do you think wants to destroy the children? Who do you think wants to? Should we fill that blank in? Should we?
No,
We? Or
that's
is
a
it
lot
not
of
worth
work.
it?
That's a lot of
Quote,
work.
Balenciaga should be shamed and held accountable. Children deserve better than our pornified culture. We owe them safety and stability. Imagine the like huge jack off motion I'm making right now. Okay, this is a pile of shit, but this is the part that I think is particularly infuriating when you listen to what this artist actually makes art about in a second here. Because the part of children can't advocate for themselves, they can't organize, vote, or lobby, they are totally defenseless. All of these are true. And the people saying them are the people who used to own the factories that would get children's limbs chopped off while sewing garments together.
Yeah, and pushing products
we-
like knowingly made unethically, like
Yeah,
without a fucking stop.
wearing clothing made by children, phones made by children, watching television shows made by children who are probably being exploited by Disney or Coco Melon. I don't think Coco Melon actually employs children. I'm pretty sure it's all an AI. But like,
yeah, I was
you
gonna
know
say,
what I'm saying?
that one's
But like
cardless.
someday the AI will have children and we'll have to worry about them too, right? Like, so there's two things in response to all of this that I think kind of ground what we're going to talk about with the photographer Gabriele Galimberti. The whole promise of this episode, we are finally arriving at 45 minutes in. And to just really just land the plane we've been flying for the last 45 minutes.
Through a lot of fucking turbulence.
Just read these two Snopes headlines, okay?
Oh,
I think
no.
it's really key. Quote,
Oh, Lord.
"No, this is not a human skin jacket from Balenciaga," in response to a theory posted amongst the Fox News circles that Balenciaga made a jacket out of human skin. Also, quote, "No, this isn't a real photo of Balenciaga stylist Lata Volkova." Quote, "One Twitter user claimed that a photograph of an individual in what appeared to be a red suit clutching two baby dolls drenched in blood-colored red paint was actually Lata Volkova, chief designer for Balenciaga." The tweet claimed that Balenciaga knew exactly what they were doing when they photographed and released the controversial campaigns. However, the picture did not feature Lata. According to Getty Images, this is a 2016 photograph of an unnamed runway model showcasing designs
about
from
to say.
Chinese designer and performance artists from a Chinese designer and performance artists collection during Mercedes-Benz China Fashion Week in 2016.
Like a completely distant and far off.
As far removed from this Lata Volkova person as you could possibly get, but no.
People
this-
just straight up lying, like straight
And-
up posting.
If I told you how many likes and retweets that post got, it
Oh,
would
I don't
make
wanna
you
know. I
jump
don't
out a
wanna know.
window, so we're
Yeah.
not going to. Now, let's finally talk about the photographer Gabriele Galimberti. So I'm going to go to his website, and I have it linked there if you want to scroll around
Yes,
while I
of
read.
course.
So this is his bio from his website. Quote, "Gabriele Galimberti, born in 1977, is an Italian photographer who frequently lives on airplanes and occasionally in Val di Chiane, Tuscany, where he was born and raised. He has spent the last few years working on long-term documentary photo projects around the world, some of which have become books, such as Toy Stories, In Her Kitchen, My Couch is Your Couch, and The Heavens. Gabriel's job consists mainly of telling the stories through portrait and short stories of people around the world, recounting their peculiarities and differences, the things they are proud of, and the belongings with which they are surround themselves. Social media, in all its forms, is a fundamental part of the research needed to get in touch, discover, and produce those stories. Gabriele committed to documentary photography after starting out as a commercial photographer and after joining the artistic collective Riverboom, best known for its work entitled Switzerland versus the World, successfully exhibited in festivals, magazines, and art shows around the world. Gabriele is currently traveling the globe, working on both solo and shared projects, as well as assignments for international magazines and newspapers such as National Geographic, The Sunday Times, Stern, Geo, Le Monde, La Repubblica, and Marie Claire. His pictures have been exhibited in shows worldwide, such as the well-known Festival Images in Vevey, Switzerland, La Rencontre de la Photographie, and the renowned V&A Museum in London. Gabriele won the World Press Photo in 2021 in his Portrait Stories category. So, let's go through some of his photo projects, and we're going to read the bios for these projects, and if there's anything interesting about them, feel free to jump in, but we're building towards something here, so I don't want to spend too long on any one of these. Quote, the first is called The Heavens, and the bio on its website reads as this, and you can actually go to this, Matt, if you want to look at these photos.
Oh no,
if
I'm
you go
already
into
on
his
it, yeah.
Projects. Cool. So the first is called The Heavens. And for those listening, feel free to listen along as you look through his website. Quote, tax havens have quietly taken the world by storm. More than half of world trade now passes through these places. They are in the news every day and are fast becoming a constant fixture of the political debate. The growing flow of articles and reports on this poorly understood subject are usually illustrated with images of palm-fringed tropical beaches. Is that what a tax haven really looks like? From Delaware to Jersey, from Singapore to Panama, and the British Virgin Islands to the City of London, passing through Cayman, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands, we take you on a tour into a rarely seen, secretive world that is quite different than what you imagine. For more than 2 years, we have traveled to the offshore centers that embody tax avoidance, secrecy, offshore banking, and extreme wealth, driven by a constant obsession with translating this rather immaterial subject into images. We have produced a body of work that shows what these places look like, but even more importantly, what they mean. It has been estimated that as much as 32 trillion are sheltered in tax havens worldwide, largely out of sight. That is 13 times the GDP of the United Kingdom. Much of this money is stashed offshore by very wealthy individuals, but a growing share is owned by companies that use tax havens, often legally, to escape financial regulations or to reduce their taxes, draining the resources country can spend on education, healthcare, and security. Tax havens are not an exotic tropical eccentricity, but have become a structural instrument of the globalized economy. They confront us with fundamental moral issues involving the relationship between the public and private, between companies and states, and between the haves and the have-nots. We have conceived the resulting book as a self-congratulatory annual report of a successful company, borrowing the photographic tropes and languages of the world we have investigated. The company, aptly named The Heavens, actually exists, and we have incorporated it in Delaware, where for a small fee, with no documents required or questions asked, an LLC can be formed in less than 20 minutes. The Heavens is now based on the same Delaware office as Apple, Bank of America, Coca-Cola, General Motors, Google, Walmart, and 285,000 other businesses.
I do. I was already a fan of this photographer before, but I didn't know about that series specifically. And as I'm going through it, it is like, again, there's a reason why nobody would understand or have any nuance involved when looking at these photographs based off the conversations we've been having.
Now, look at his project Toy Stories, because this one is key.
Yes, I know this one as well because of his Instagram and the comments he'll been leaving on these photographs.
Yeah. So this is the one that has been referenced throughout this entire series. Toy Stories is the campaign Toy Stories is the reference for the campaign involving the children posed on beds with the teddy bears. So this is the bio, and it's very short because this is a very, very self-explanatory photo series.
Absolutely.
Quote,
yeah.
For over 2 years, I have visited more than 50 countries and created colorful images of boys and girls in their homes and neighborhoods with their most prized possessions, their toys. From Texas to India, Malawi to China, Iceland, Morocco, and Fiji, I recorded the spontaneous and natural joy that unites kids despite their diverse backgrounds. Whether the child owns a veritable fleet of miniature cars or a single stuffed monkey, the pride that they have is moving, funny, and thought-provoking. And if you look at these images, not only are they very clearly a commentary on class disparities around the world and the ways in which various companies and countries specifically and cultures have monetized childhood, you know? Not only are you juxtaposing class between children in different countries, but the ways those countries monetize and market to children and what kinds of toys are incentivized and prioritized. Like, you can kind of start to see what Balenciaga was getting at in its Toy Stories campaign. Whereas, you know, Demna probably was like, you know, inside we're all kids at Christmas getting our toys, but these are like adult toys now. And, you know, the child on the bed with the bear reflects the adult self confronting their childlike wonder at corruption, you know, of getting a bunch of youth. Toys. Yeah. And it's like artistic and a little self-congratulatory and self-flagellating all at once. Like, I'm not trying to like
eye
say
roll in general.
Yeah, but you can understand what the artistic intent is quite easily when you look at these photos that they are based on.
Well, also the original photos
specifically was commissioned to recreate for Balenciaga.
Yeah. I mean, the original photos are like clearly, I mean, it's like 101 media literacy, obviously, with looking at them, but it's basically just like, yeah, let's have kids show us their toys, what they're proud of, line them up, we'll put them in like a grid, we'll put them in this fashion and take a photo. And obviously the Balenciaga one makes my eyes roll a lot because it's just props, they're just ads, they're just products that Balenciaga is paying to put in this thing. So it's kind of taking away the kind of like major essence of everything, which is let's see what these specific kids are playing with as toys and what they enjoy. And now we're just like faking it for an ad. But like you just said, it's pretty clear what the reference is for, and this is something this guy has done before. And now these photos, when you go on his Instagram, people are just commenting like crazy. Oh my God, this is pedophilic behavior. Why is the doll in this one girl's photo? Why is the doll naked? Why is the doll wearing fishnets in this? As if like people didn't have toys with dolls that didn't have clothes on, as if people didn't have toys that were different or weird growing up, as if like that is an indication of something malicious on the photographer's part. Yeah, it's just, it's like, so, it like
that's
hurts
what
my
I'm
brain.
Here. And also like with all of these photos in particular, you know, his later work, like Toy Stories, he also has one in kitchens where like women show like what their kitchens look like, and other things like, and one that we're building towards now.
Yes.
Everything gets laid out in a very like grid-like uniform fashion. And there has been like genuine, interesting artistic criticism about the grid and how it both dehumanizes the subject and turns it into spectacle rather than like documentary. And whether
like
the purpose of these
taxonomy.
images... Yeah. Whether the purpose of these images is spectacle or documentary, right? Like that is a valid criticism that I find levied against Galimberti.
Like that's actually interesting.
In previous engagements with his work, that's something I've also considered. And something that I think about, especially with his work, is like, to me at least, what he is doing, especially you can see most clearly here in the Toy Stories, is he is removing at best what he can do, the barriers to understanding the cultural context within these objects, so that anyone anywhere looking at it can attempt to decipher the meaning of the image, right? Like there is a usefulness in context and within cultural nuance and understanding, especially in documentary photography and in like anthropological studies. That is something that like cultural critics and cultural artists drawing from cultural inspirations, and also the criticism levied against anthropologists all the time is like, at what point are you like a voyeur on something? At what point are you acting as like a colonizing force? Like, how do you accurately represent someone? Like, these are things that we're always thinking about as artists, but like he's saying, I think that like, you know, us looking at these photos is going to at best, very closely understand them the way someone in Italy might, who we don't share the same language where Galimberti's from, but we can both kind of draw similar conclusions from the image because he has made them almost scientific rather than artistic through that like grid-like process. Does that make sense? Or am I just
No, I totally agree. No, I love this kind of stuff. I mean, this is the thing that people really fail to possess when it comes talking about these subjects sometimes. But like, literally the what is interesting to me, at least as a viewer when looking at this, is it's more about the space they're in. It's more about the toys they have. It's more about what can even fit in the photo, what can fit in this prompt, basically. And it's like, I hate to be so annoying, but like, yes, it's asking questions. It's like doing something interesting. And
it's
there's definitely very real critiques you can do on that I think are very valid and interesting.
You know what? I have a lot of criticism of his work, but the purpose of art is to be engaged with, criticized, and thought about, right? Like, there is so much in culture now where everything that we consume is both immediately taxonomized and also immediately categorized within a moral spectrum that we increasingly have no control over, right? And everything is good or bad, positive or negative, representative or unrepresentative. And like, so much of art is about the experience of experiencing. Do you know what I mean? Right? Like, art is reactive. Art is meant to be argued with and thought about. It is not something that you digest like food and then shit out later. Like, that is what I think a lot of people fail, I think, within like, media literacy itself, is that they look at something and they want to immediately be told by that something whether they are a good or bad person. And if they are a bad person, then the work of art is no longer a good work of art. It is abusive or evil or problematic, right? And like, their engagement stops there. And there was a post that was shared by our Discord, friend of the show, shared this, and I won't say their name because they obviously haven't given us permission to say what it is. But if this person is listening and they know where this image came from, I will also post this on Instagram and do my best to find the credits for the artist. We do not take credit for this, and I don't want this artist to go uncredited, but it is a really interesting thing that I think I've been thinking about. It is a comic of a person pointing at an abstract painting, and the person says, haha, what does this represent? And the painting points back at them and says, what do you represent? And then as the person lays dead on the floor, the text reads, quote, an abstract painting will react to you if you react to it. You get from it what you bring from it. It will meet you halfway, but no further. It is alive if you are. It represents something, and so do you. You, sir, are a space too. Like, I have been thinking about that so much in relationship to this Balenciaga stuff, because
honestly,
so many people just like came upon these images and were immediately dismissed by the image as not understanding the image. And so because they didn't immediately understand it, it was bad to them, and their engagement stopped there, right? Like, and the ways people talk about it online are so far removed from the reality of the image that it almost makes you feel like they're talking about separate images entirely, right? Because they actually haven't like taken the time to decipher it outside of zooming in at 300% to like,
or
find
quite literally
clues.
Don't actually know anything about art history at all.
Well,
like, I don't know much either, but I've taken some classes at least. I've studied some things. I've looked at
But
art
you know
before.
what? Art history is certainly enriching, but if you have a curious mind and a pattern recognition through various sources, then you can decipher things in interesting ways that may be removed from cultural or historical context, but are still interesting, right? Like, art isn't cemented in time. Art is constantly being interpreted by us as long as it is around.
I was going to say,
interpreted.
it's changing over time. It changes on who's looking at it and then what happens afterwards. Like, that's a part of the dynamicness.
And it's funny, I was thinking about this too. We talked about the like Disneyfication and Cocomelonification of society, but like, you know how in past iterations of the podcast and in previous episodes, we've talked at length about how so much, culturally speaking, society and television and art are determined by YouTubers that make like 41 clues you missed in the Loki season 2 trailer, you know, like, and then like The next day, it's
Absolutely.
41 more secrets you might have missed in the Loki trailer. And like, here's every Easter egg in Andor episode 3, like that kind of thing. Where
Yes.
like people's engagement with art isn't about like understanding art for the sake of it, but about like clues and Easter eggs.
Cracking the secret open. Like it's a
Yeah.
fucking choose your own adventure or like escape room.
I hate it. Okay. But let's
I also
keep going.
blame Netflix for this, the like
Yeah.
Netflixification of content. Like,
Absolutely. Okay.
There's always a twist.
It's definitely also not just Disney's fault, but Westworld and Game of Thrones' fault as well.
and Reddit's
But-
fault, let's be honest.
And Reddit. Yeah, it's actually all evil does go back to Reddit. Okay, so this is another project, and this is one that involves sexual assault, and so I just want to give that trigger warning off top. This is called G.I. Jane's Other War. So this one is actually the reason I decided to do this episode at all, because originally we didn't want to talk about Balenciaga, and then I looked into the photographer and I found this project, and I got so infuriated after reading the description of this and how just fucking hideous our society is. I was like texting you and I said, fuck it, we're going
Yes.
to talk about Balenciaga.
You were
So-
like, we live in a sick culture.
we live in a sick culture, and I will say it again when I'm done. Quote, 1 of every 3 American women soldiers serving in Iraq or Afghanistan have been the victim of sexual abuse on the part of male U.S. soldiers, and between 71% and 90% say they were the object of harassment by their male comrade in arms, subjected to constant denigration, insults, and vulgar slurs. So writes Helen Benedict, Columbia University professor, in her book The Lonely Soldier, The Private War of Women Serving in Iraq, which has already unleashed a fierce debate in the United States. In war zones, the ratio of women soldiers is 1 to every 10 men. Feeling as though you are a target 24 hours a day is not easy, Helen Benedict explains. The message the men are sending is, quote, we don't respect you. We don't want you here. Then comes the physical assault, and finally rape. According to Army statistics, quote, only 83.83 out of every 1,000 women in war zones have been the victims of sexual abuse. However, the Army also makes it clear that those are just the reported cases, and that 90% of rapes are kept quiet. Usually the aggressors are the women's superiors, and most are often they are never brought to trial. In addition to all of this, it is also more difficult for women to gain access to health care, as only 14% of military clinics have departments dedicated to women's health issues. With the assistance of American associations that provide help and psychological support to female veterans suffering from MST, military sexual trauma, I carried out extensive research for this project. I was able to establish contact with many of these women, veterans of the latest wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, but also of earlier wars, all of them with stories to tell of rape and sexual abuse. I met with these women, interviewed them, and then photographed them. Now, we are not here to litigate the U.S. Army because it has already been well litigated by us on this podcast
Yeah, a
and
strong
by
pass.
listeners and leftists of all ilk. We are not justifying the existence of the U.S. military. We are not justifying the existence of soldiers or women in the military. And we certainly have well documented our feelings about the war in Iraq and Afghanistan and the ways in which the plight of women soldiers in America is placed higher in the order of importance and humanized in a way that the women in the countries they terrorize as members of the army are completely dehumanized and erased from history. Still to this day ongoing. And we see this in all active U.S. engagements and terror efforts around the world, specifically American terror efforts. Like, let's be clear if that needs to get spelled out very plainly. But part of what I found so deeply affecting about this isn't because I didn't know any of this information, but just because what we're talking about is, you know, the sexual abuse of children and how this photographer, through the production of these images, has justified, glorified, promoted the sexual abuse of children. And previously, within his work in the 2000s, extensively documented the efforts of the U.S. military in covering up sexual abuse of women. statistics that we can quantify, statistics that are known to us and have through time become only more egregious as we learn about cover-ups, as we learn about what gets counted as sexual assault, as we learn about the kinds of people that still are active within the US military structure who are frequent perpetrators of sexual assault, how courts within the US military are designed to protect abusers and protect rapists and murderers, how a lot of those abusers not just terrorize women within the armies, but also women in the countries they are terrorizing, how they rape and commit violence against women in Iraq and Afghanistan and previously in places like Vietnam or Japan or Korea or in all other active war zones. Like, this is something that has only become worse the longer we have studied and looked into it as a society. And he has documented that quite plainly and in his best way attempted to humanize these victims, learn from them, hear their stories, and get these messages out. And then 10 years later becomes the victim in his own right of the sexual crusade against children, trans people, queer people, and art itself. Like, how
so
fucked up is that?
It's so fucked up.
How fucked up is that? Like, I know we've talked about how in like the Me Too era, like, I hate that we live in a society where we have to like double end everything we say with like a justification for saying it at all, right? Like, obviously bad men,
yes.
Yeah, obviously bad men can like make art about technically true things, right? Like, can make moving art. Like, we've litigated this already, but like, I just find something so dark and like completely just mortifying about this. Once I read this, like, it just punched me right in the face. Like, I have no other way to explain my emotional reaction to looking through this man's art projects.
We asked this last time we asked all of you listening currently to like really think and ruminate and spend time thinking about what does child abuse look like, or what does child abuse look like through images or through images like this? Like, what exactly happened in these photographs that is depicting, illustrating, supporting, whatever you call it, child abuse or child sex abuse? And it's like, the further we go in, the more I literally feel like we are all on a insane fever dream that like someone concocted that I did not choose to opt into. Because the fact that obviously there are people who feel a way about this and are not the type to go on this man's Instagram and comment on every other photo the word pedophile and that they should be locked up and arrested and shot and killed, because that is happening all over the place to anyone who's involved in this. But I know there are people who are not that deep in. But to even be on the side of like, oh, this is so inappropriate, this is so terrible, not to do like the whataboutism or whatever, but like, if this is where we have to draw the line, if this instance in this, well, it's commercial, it's not, art in a fine art museum, it's commercial art commissioned by a large luxury brand. If this is where we are going to die on a hill or make this line, we are so fucking screwed. We are so fucking screwed. We have way too much art and media being produced every fucking minute that is just so much further more disturbing and unethical than anything that we've seen with Balenciaga so far. It literally makes me sick. I'm still thinking of that woman who says that fashion needs to be entertaining and fun. And it literally would render any artwork that remotely challenges the human mind or emotional senses to ever exist. Like, God forbid.
No, I know. Now, okay. This next part is inherently tied up in my own emotional reaction to, as well as the historical context for and the events leading up to the Colorado Springs shooting and massacre, as well as anything from Pulse nightclub to just about anything you can rattle off the top of your head. Colorado Springs is obviously at the forefront of my head and my brain and heart, as is so many people I'm sure listening to this podcast who are, again, deeply affected by it. I'm sure that doesn't need to be said, but I think is still something, to put on the record there. So if that is something that you're sensitive to, like, I just want to warn you as we start talking about guns now, like, I really am not trying to just browbeat everyone over the head with very serious things, but this is the part I think that really ties everything together for me. And I think, has really kept me thinking quite deeply about this whole series we've ran over the last 2 weeks now. So the final project I want to talk about from Gabriele Galimberti is The Ameriguns, which we have all seen, even if you don't think
I believe these are the most
you
popular
have
ones,
seen it.
honestly. Yeah, like these were very popular.
It became very viral on the internet this summer 2022, if you're listening to this sometime in the future. And these images were like litigated extensively on the internet because they were posted in the wake of a mass shooting at Uvalde. So in Texas, the school shooting in Texas. So like, I just want to like say that was why these images became very popular, but they preceded those shootings and I guess existed amongst separate shootings in 2021 when they were first published and won an award. So just know that historically, like this is where these images sit. They're very recent. So it's called The Ameriguns. And if you're looking at the links in our description, you can actually go to his website and see this project. I'm going to read the bio for it. Half of all firearms in the world that are owned by private citizens for non-military purposes are in the United States of America. The overall number indeed exceeds the country's population. 400 million weapons for 328 million people. This is not a coincidence, nor is it a market-related issue. It is rather a matter of tradition and constitutional guarantee established within the Second Amendment ratified in 1791. This law reassures the inhabitants of the newly independent territories that their federal government would not be able to one day abuse its authority over them, and they are guaranteed the right to bear arms. 250 years later, the Second Amendment is still ingrained in all aspects of American life. Gabriele Galimberti has traveled to every corner of the United States, from New York to the city of Honolulu, to meet proud gun owners and photograph them and their weapons. He has photographed people and guns in their homes and neighborhoods, even in places where no one would expect to find such arsenals. These often disturbing portraits, together with the accompanying stories based on interviews, provide an unexpected and uncommon view of what the institution of the Second Amendment really represents today. Now, again, I think these images are most closely linked artistically with his Toy Stories photo series.
Yeah,
I think you can see the evolution of this very particular style. In a lot of the photos, it is like gun owners on their beds with their arsenals in front of them. Arsenals which include bazookas and machine guns and all manner of weaponry, grenades,
like serious
missiles.
tactical gear, like
Yes.
even guns on like tripods and shit.
And a lot of the, I think, commentary within this series is also commentary on where these arsenals exist, right? Like so often within American culture, it's like, oh, Texas, the land of the gun owner, right? But a lot of these places are, I think, purposefully photographed and set up in such a way to like really confront you with like these people exist everywhere. These gun owners and their arsenals can be anywhere. They can be your neighbor. They can be your upstairs neighbor in your apartment building. They could be your longtime friend that you never knew. They could be in liberal bastions and in the most Republican places we can imagine in this country, in the richest and in the poorest neighborhoods, right? Like that is really what he's getting at here.
Yeah, and you can even see like it's either sometimes it's a few guns and sometimes it's like literally up to 300 different weapons. So it's like also about the staggering volume.
Yeah, and I think that these images also like really confront a lot of like the class and racial elements of gun owning as well and the communities in which these happen, right? Like Gabriele Galimberti is not American. He's not from here, and he is an Italian photographer who has become, throughout his work, very interested in American culture. So I think that like anthropological context is important to him going to like places that most photographers would describe as like quote unquote, and I'm placing heavy quotes around this because this is not my turn of phrase, inner city or like wealthy white areas. Like I think him being Italian coming here to photograph this is like important and part of the very valid criticism that I saw against this photo series and one of the things a lot of people confronted. But like I said originally, this became something that was very viral because of, once again, another mass shooting in 2022. So these images are not from 2022. They're from 2021. They won an award in 2021. They won the photo contest, the World Press Photo Contest in 2021. He took these photos over 2 years. But when the mass shooting and slaughter at Robb Elementary School happened in Texas over the summer, these images got posted online as like a, can you believe this happens in America kind of thing, as like a gotcha moment.
Oh, God.
And that was, I think, where a lot of the virality came from, because people negatively reacted to these images being associated with the mass shooting, even though that was not the context they existed in. And what does that remind you of? Images being taken out of context to justify a moral or emotional reaction to a fucked up aspect of living within America.
Yeah.
Seems similar, right?
God forbid you do your research or look into anything in depth.
To all of my salty, well-seasoned leftists who are listening to this podcast, who come to me world weary and afraid and tired and stressed, I am so sorry for the Charlie Warzel jump scare that is about to happen, as that is the author of this interview from The Atlantic. So apologies for the Charlie Warzel jump scare. I apologize, and his words are not mine. I just want to make that clear to anyone being like, why the fuck are you quoting Charlie? Okay, so just to get that out of the way. Quote, this is from an interview in The Atlantic. Quote, what the viral gun photographer has to say about his subjects. In the beginning of the article, we really don't need to get into it. Quote, not long after news broke of the shooting, this is from, it was posted June 1st, 2022. Quote, not long after the news broke of the shooting at Robb Elementary in Texas, Gabriele Galimberti's photos started appearing on my social media feeds. The first one I saw was of a family of 4 on their back deck with one child in a tricycle. They are surrounded by more than 100 firearms, long rifles, as well as dozens of handguns and semi-automatic rifles with scopes, each one intricately laid out in a proud display. There are so many guns that it looks like as if the deck is made of weapons. There are so many guns that, in order to fit the family's longer rifles and frames, they had to be laid out on the roof of the house. It's a jarring portrait due to the amount of weaponry, but also of the casual posing of the family. It is shocking to imagine this amount of firepower in one household, and yet the photo suggests there's something very banal about this level of gun ownership in America. Now, the editorializing from Charlie continues in a very aggravating way, where he's like, people are using this to justify their hatred of the Second Amendment. They're politicizing the shooting, right? Like, jack off motion. But this is from the interview that follows with Gabriele. Now, Matt, I'm going to read for Galimberti. Would you mind reading for Charlie?
Yes, let me pull it up here. Do you want me to start with Charlie?
In the notes, we're going to read actually what I have documented here.
Yeah, I have it here.
Yeah, so start with Charlie.
In the past few days, I've seen your Ameriguns portraits everywhere. Often, they're posted without attribution, which is awful, and I'm sure quite frustrating for you. How does it feel to see this work, which is now a few years old, go viral?
Gabriele. It's weird and perverse how I'm getting so much attention after such a big tragedy. I don't know how to feel. The success of my photos at the moment is because my photos are really easy to understand. You don't need to be an expert in photography or even guns to understand the message. By the way, what was it that we were saying about the story, the Toy Stories? Remember what I said about the Toy Stories, about the intent behind his photos? It's impossible to look at these images and not see what's there. And that makes my photos so easy to share and to be used for a certain, sometimes negative communication. But I think when people use my photos to share and be used for a certain, sometimes negative communication, but I think when people use my photos to judge the people in them, that is a mistake. The real judgment in my work is on the society that allows this. The real problem isn't these 40 people I photographed. It is the regulations and the culture that permits it. When you look at the 2 last mass shootings, it is absurd that kids celebrating their 18th birthday can go buy guns, but couldn't go to a bar and drink. It's probably far too easy to buy guns in this country. The focus should be on the regulations and not on these people. These people I photographed are buying guns because they can and are free to do so. And if you are shocked by seeing this family with 200 guns, then maybe the real problem is there are no regulations that would keep them from obtaining these guns. And I want to be clear, it's not only guns I photographed, but also people with bazookas and flamethrowers, all legally obtained. They're free to buy them. I'd never shot a gun before 3 years ago, but doing this project, I was offered and shot many guns, and have to be honest and say that sometimes it was very fun. I can understand the attraction to guns. I can understand why, as a human, you can be attracted to certain objects even if they are dangerous. The problem is not the attraction, it is about the regulation. The problem is when a shooting like the one in Texas happens, the culture argues about giving guns to teachers instead of regulating them. It's weird and perverse.
Back to Charlie. I think your work is touching that very raw nerve in American culture and politics right now. There is a group of people seeing these photos of people posing proudly with a militia's worth of tactical firepower and asking, how on earth do we allow this legally?
Galimberti ends the interview. This is his last question from this. And I think when I read this, I was at work putting these notes together, and I unprompted, I guess prompted by this, but I guess I was so frustrated with this Balenciaga story, and the shooting in Colorado Springs had just happened, and all of my feelings about rising violence against LGBTQ people and trans people and queer people and against trans children and the legislation and the Supreme Court and who's getting elected and the upcoming presidential election and all of it, right? All coalesced on this answer that he gives here. And I completely unprompted burst into tears at work. So he says, quote, "You know, it's odd. I'm getting hundreds of requests to talk about my work in the aftermath of this mass shooting, but they are all international. You are one of the few requests from the USA." Which I think just says everything, doesn't it?
I'm just hearing like a horn go off, and it just keeps getting louder and louder and louder. It's
No,
purposely
it
until
was
I can't
like-
think anymore.
I was reading this interview with him, right? And there's more there that is just like back and forth about the shooting in Texas in the summer. And like, I don't want to like get back into it.
Yeah, we don't need to do that.
But like, as I was reading it, it was like there was this droning buzz in my ears that was like getting louder and louder until I couldn't focus. Like my vision was going blurry as I finished this interview. 'Cause I was like, oh my God, like, not only as a society are we doomed to repeat the past and just continually relitigate the same white nationalist Christian bullshit propaganda over and over and over again, but this person's work has in the same year, like in the same year, experienced back-to-back news cycles, both directly correlating to the art, but also directly in response to the art itself. Like, I was just like, fucking hell.
And it's literally all because of something Americans are doing at large. Nothing this photographer has done personally. Nothing anyone involved with these photographs has done personally. It is.
I mean, we could probably guess
to
where some of these people with guns are. Some of these people with guns are up to. Like, obviously, but like, yes. Your point still
But again,
stands. That like, it's
it's
not about the
literally-
photos. It's about us.
The fact that you can even find this many people with this many guns willing to take photographs like this is the point of the entire photo shoot. Like, it's. I hate
And,
this country
like-
so much. I hate
No,
it so much.
I know
like, we're
it's
the
so cheap
only
to
place
say
in
that.
the world where this even exists in general.
I know it's like feel cheap to say like, oh my God, I hate America. But like, just like confronting this, this is what I'm talking about, right? That comic that I'll share on Instagram tomorrow. Like, so much of just what I've been thinking about is like how art is And I hate to say it because it makes me sound like one of those fucking YA books that we had to read in response to 9/11. Remember, like, The Giver?
Stop.
Remember The Giver?
Yes. Oh, Lord mercy. I did not read that.
About how,
but I
like,
know what you're talking about.
everything is gray and then one person sees color. Like, I hate to sound like one of those, like, shitty YA books from the 2000s
I know.
that were, like, written in response to, like, censorship and oppression. And then we did book reports about in the 5th grade. But, like, like, art is becoming such a precious and increasingly scarce resource and wonder in this world that, like, artistic expression is evaporating extremely fast. Methods for artistic expression, channels for it, the tools to accomplish it, the ways in which it is increasingly becoming politicized and, like, litigated against. Every single day, we are losing ways to express ourselves, be expressed, and be understood as people, and have our society be represented or artistically, culturally, photographically, filmically, all of this, right? Like, websites are closing and losing their archives. Twitter, God knows what's going to happen to it tomorrow, let alone a month from now, right? Like, we've experienced so many culls just on the internet alone within our lifetime, but also so many tamp downs on the kinds of movies that get made, the kinds of movies that are promoted and valued by society and the studios. We've lived through the post 9/11 patriotic boom where you couldn't criticize the US government or else your life would be over. We just talked about the chicks like 6 months ago, right? And what happened when they spoke out against Bush. Like, We've lived through this in our lifetime. Our parents have lived through this. Their parents have lived through this. As long as mass media has happened, in America, we have experienced it shrink ever so slowly and then now very quickly. And I just look at this and I'm just like, in the face of this Balenciaga backlash, like, it is what I think I had such an initially intense reaction to, which you can hear last week, when I'm telling people, like, are you all fucking happy now, right? All of you so-called principled fucking leftists indulged the QAnon-addled TikTokers and the people feeding them those QAnon conspiracies in the news. And you engaged in this bullshit to begin with, and now look, right? Are you fucking happy with yourselves? Are you all fucking pleased that this time next year, the only things that are going to be in fucking movie theaters is Babies 1, Babies 2, and fucking Coco Melon Part 3?
Stop. Make it stop.
Like,
literally Avengers 74 and Coco Melon's, like, Bizarre Adventures or whatever.
That's what I'm
the only two things that
like, are you all fucking happy
24/7.
with yourselves, right? Like, when church becomes mandatory and gay people aren't allowed to shop anywhere and trans people get litigated and, like, actually erased from public life, are you all going to be pleased that you reblogged the tweet saying Balenciaga should really apologize for this? I just hope you think about that, okay? When you have to reap what you have sown, I hope you all live with it and truly understand what you have fucking done, okay? Because the floodgates have been opened now, okay? The floodgates have been thrown wide open, and we are all working, living, and dying in hell. That's how I feel.
I really thought when Disney opened that resort you can just live in, like 24/7 live within a Disney resort, I was like, okay, they're finding their spaces. They're finding ways to take themselves out of society so they can live in a Coco Melon fantasy. Like, they can just live in a pretty completely Disney-fied, cartoonized, sanitized lifestyle. And yet, no, we're forced to deal with them every day in public spaces. It's literally coming in from all angles. Like, I genuinely want these people to all go on their own island because that's the only way they can live. They literally cannot live with anyone having a different opinion.
I hope you're all happy for posting those fucking TikToks when you have to say the Pledge of Allegiance and Romans 6:13 before you're allowed to shop at Target. Okay, like, I hope you're pleased. I hope you're happy. walking
amount of
into
people-
Target with your hand over your heart. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, right? Like, I hope you're pleased, okay, as you check out at fucking
So
Target.
they can buy their child-made clothing. Anyway,
Don't say anyway. You
genuinely-
can live with that. You said it, and it's true. Stand
It is
by what
true.
you say.
And you want to talk about saving the children, talk about the way that half the shit you buy in any fucking store is made by children that you will never see and you purposely will keep ignoring.
That you
Anyway,
have invisibilized as a society.
Yes, but like, I just, the amount of people that were so ready and willing and quick to just spout QAnon like propaganda throughout all this. Like, I can see a lot of people who didn't know that's what they were doing and didn't understand that's what was happening. I mean, the reason why this stuff spreads is it preys on ignorance and it preys off people who are basically, you know, want to find a language or methodology that makes sense to them. And unfortunately, this does make sense to a lot of people. But how quickly people were able to just immediately assume the worst and assume this was literally deep state behavior, signs posted by the Illuminati. It's like, literally, I have to discredit everything. Like,
You know what?
Can't.
I want them all to know that when TikTok starts force feeding them Bible verses and they're posting about how weird it is that there was like Christian nationalists doing paid adverts on the nightly news, and they're like, isn't this weird? Something's going on with this whole fascism thing. I want you all to know that I wrote your names down, and I will be posting that list of names when you decide to tweet in a year how weird this all is, okay? I have your names. I have not forgotten, and I will not forget. We are not the same. We and the listeners of this fucking show are built different, okay? And that's that on that. That's how
that
you
on that.
snap the tea, sis. I had to land there with a joke, obviously, or else everything is doomed.
You literally have to laugh. All we have left.
Wait, let's have a moment of laughing. We're laughing. So welcome, guys, to Eating for Free. For those of you now tuning in again, like we said, for the first time since last week, we loved that you're here, and we cannot wait to keep delivering you fine, fresh, country-raised brainworms week after week. This has been, I wouldn't say a pleasure, but it has certainly been instructive to do this series over the last 2 weeks. Thank you all for tuning in and promoting the show and talking about it. It has been a huge boon to us, as well as just very affirming for the work that we genuinely love to do here. As much as it can be terrifying and haunting and demoralizing at times to have to confront all of this, it feels good to put this show out into the world and to do the research and work that we do every week. So we thank you so much. And if you want to continue to support us, besides just listening, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/eating for free, that helps us continue to make the show every week. It helps pay our bills. It helps relieve a lot of the anxieties that come with dedicating ourselves to doing this. And it is just a way to keep the show ad-free and independent and in our hands, which are all things that we value and aspire to continue doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's a promise that we can make here more than ever. So thank you to our patrons. Genuinely, I am so grateful and appreciative of all of you. Thank you to our listeners. Thank you for showing us just how much this show means to you and how much you have enjoyed our recent work. It really is very affirming for us, and all of us here, myself, Matt, and Ashlyn included, all genuinely appreciate it. Other than that, all of your good wishes and TikTok videos and thoughts and prayers and manifestations and blood sacrifices have meant that Matt is now testing negative for COVID. So we shall reunite next week.
And as you can hear me coughing through it, but yes, finally negative, still symptomatic. Love reading people having coughs for up to 6 months after COVID. It's the lovely world we live in, like we were saying earlier. I really do feel like, though, when you were talking, not to get back into the spiral of it all, it really does feel like it's our duty to do this sometimes. Like, I genuinely am asking everybody, if you're not already doing it, to just like watch films, read books with friends, and like talk about it and like have critical thinking and like debate things, because like at this point it feels like that doesn't exist anymore. It really feels like it's hard to find.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean,
Start a book club.
We've been hosting a lot of movie streams amongst friends, and it has been so much fun to just like watch movies that people have never seen before and discuss and fight about and talk about and think about those movies,
Right.
which is something that feels like in a previous iteration of our society so small, but now is just so affirming and fun and just makes me a better thinker. It makes me a better critic, makes me a better researcher. So to all of you who have joined us on those movie streams, thank you so much. One of our more recent ones was just randomly because I was in the mood, Goodfellas, and just what a fucking movie, man.
I was so
Scorsese,
sad I
bitch.
missed it. I'm so sad I missed it. It was the
Just-
COVID girl. She wasn't gonna let me enjoy
Scorsese
that.
was like, let me give y'all a little pussy. Let me give y'all a little cunt. Like, oh God, what a movie. A movie by people who love movies. As Harry Styles would say, it's a movie that feels like a real movie.
I mean, he's like so
Can you
true
believe this
bestie.
all
So
started with
true bestie.
Harry Styles and Olivia Wilde? Do you remember that? How wild.
Yes, all of this. All
our
of this
whole
started
lives.
from there.
Our whole, that was the Big Bang. Like in the beginning.
It's not
there
pre-COVID
was-
anymore. It's pre-Harry Styles.
It's pre-Harry Olivia.
It's pre-
It's pre-DWD press tour.
We were different people before then.
Oh wait, what if it's BDWD and ADWD
Stop.
before Don't Worry Darling and
Instead of-
after Don't Worry Darling?
The new eating for free timeline, absolutely.
I'm gonna create that, and y'all better get ready for it. So, besides that, go to _ eating for free on Twitter. We are Lorecroft Barbie and _ Matthew Lawson, or just Matthew Lawson everywhere on Instagram and on Twitter. Go to eatingforfree.com to get all the latest news, tips, tricks, pussy stunts, snaps, the teas, wigs, mama hunty boots. Also go to eatingforfree.com /merch if you want to show that you are a member of the Illuminati, if you want to show that you are a member of Big Soy Naturals Girls and Gays LLC Incorporated. Also, just as an antidote to listening to this podcast, I also want to take a moment to promote and beg you all to go listen to our sister podcast, Big Soy Naturals.
Yes.
They are continually doing work week after week, just phenomenal work. And it is just a really great compliment to our podcast, and we love them over there. We love Big Soy Naturals. I have a pair myself. And, you know, it really goes hand in hand, these two podcasts. So if you haven't go listen and subscribe, follow them, tweet at them. They love it. So other than that, once again, we are signing out for the week. Thank God Matt doesn't have COVID anymore, because recording in a room yelling to myself is a little bit too much. I think my
I literally
neighbors
can
might start calling the
hear
police.
The echo in like this empty room like bounce back through my like, headphones, and it's just like, oh my God, I'm literally like, I'll dissociate and be like, I'm just in a room yelling.
Yeah, no, I'm
I
like,
hate it so much.
you have become a figment of my imagination at this point. I have not felt the touch of your body in so long.
You're like, was it real? Do I remember ever meeting them before? Like,
Not
some
you,
of the
they,
memories
theming
are vague.
yourself.
I thought that word existed. It didn't have to necessarily denote gender, right? Like I think it was used in other instances before.
non-binary people don't exist. Is that what you're saying?
Those are your words. Those are exclusively your words, and I will let you, as a woman, have those words and let them
Thank you
stand
for
on their own.
Thank you for believing women, unlike so many people
It's
in society.
it's so valid for you to say that and have those feelings that I independently will not acknowledge.
Two,
One.
Good.
Goodbye.
Come on, if you know the words, let's go.
What do I think of her?
Yes?
I don't think of her.
Glass of red wine and a swisher. I think you get the picture, bitch.
Here I go. Oh,